You know, when a state has to step in and take over a school system's finances, it feels like it came out of nowhere, right? A total shock. But was it? Today, we're going to perform a kind of autopsy on the Warwick school system. And our guide for this is a document called the Cushman Report. It lays out a trail of evidence suggesting this was anything but sudden. So, to really get to the why of it all, we first have to look at the what, a pretty dramatic event that forced decades of simmering problems right out into the open. And boom, there it is. In early 2025, the state of Rhode Island just took the wheel. They took control of the finances, stripping the locally elected school committee of its power over the budget. Now, you got to understand, this is a huge deal. The state doesn't do this lightly. It's a last resort for school districts that are in really, really deep trouble. So the big question on everyone's mind is, why? If you live in Warwick, you're probably thinking, it's simple. We just don't have enough money. The state just needs to give the schools more funding. And honestly, that seems like the obvious answer. But the Cushman Report, well, it challenges that whole idea. It asks a different question. Was this really about not having enough cash, or was it about how the system itself was functioning? Or maybe not functioning? To get to the bottom of it, the report basically becomes a detective. It uncovers this evidence trail that stretches back nearly 20 years. And it makes a pretty bold claim. This crisis wasn't a surprise at all. It was the totally predictable end to a long, long story. So let's follow that trail. Okay, before we go any further, there's one key idea from this report you absolutely have to get. It's called the alignment gap. Sounds complicated, but I promise it's not. Think of it like this. If you have fewer students in your schools, you should probably have fewer staff, right? It just makes sense. The alignment gap is just a way of measuring how far off that simple math gets. And when that gap gets big, you're in trouble. The report breaks this whole saga down into three distinct parts, three phases. First up, Phase 1, strategic alignment. Then comes Phase 2, reactive alignment. And finally, Phase 3, which the report calls a catastrophic structural decoupling. Let's walk through it and see how things went so completely off the rails. All right, let's look each phase, and we're going to watch how that little crack we talked about, that alignment gap, turns into this massive financial canyon. Here's the thing that might actually surprise you. In the beginning, they were doing it right. In Phase 1, from 2007 to 2013, the district lost over 16% of its students. That's a lot. But look at the staffing levels. They dropped right along with them by over 14%. The report calls this a time of tough but necessary decisions, like closing 3 schools. The system was actually adapting to its new reality. But then, things started to slip. Welcome to Phase 2. Between 2014 and 2019, students kept leaving the district, but the response became, well, reactive. The report says the staffing changes were all over the place, not strategic. That proactive, facing reality planning just stopped. And that alignment gap, it started to grow. And this is Phase 3, the 5 years that just broke the system. Between 2020 and 2025, Warwick lost another 11% of its students. But get this, look at the staffing numbers. They didn't go down. They went up by more than 2%. Students and staff were now moving in completely opposite directions. The report calls this a catastrophic misalignment. And honestly, that's the perfect description. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth does that happen? How do you end up adding staff while thousands of student desks are sitting empty? Well, the report argues it was no accident. It points to a series of key decisions that created this financial separation from reality. The report flags this moment as a critical turning point. The superintendent in 2021 put it in black and white. A deficit budget is inevitable unless staffing is cut to match the falling enrollment. I mean, the warning could not have been clearer. So how was that crystal clear warning received? According to the report, the superintendent's proposed cuts were flat out rejected. Then he was actually excluded from the new teacher contract negotiations. On top of that, the district spent over $19 million in one-time COVID relief funds, money they knew was never coming back, on permanent staff. And no more schools were closed. The report frames this not as a lack of information, but as a series of choices made in spite of being warned. So these choices, they had a real cost in both people and in dollars. Let's look at the numbers the report uses to put a price tag on that catastrophic misalignment. First, just the human scale. Since 2007, the district lost over 3,700 students. To put that into perspective, that's like an entire high school's worth of students, and then some, simply gone. This was the reality the system was facing. And as a direct result of that decoupling in Phase 3, the report calculates that by 2025, the district was carrying 191 staff positions that were completely out of sync with its actual student population. And here's the price tag. The report estimates that those excess positions cost the district $80.7 million in just 5 years. The report calls this a mismanagement tax, a cost paid by taxpayers for the failure to adapt.
Ouch.
So, after laying out all the evidence, the 3 phases, the key decisions, and the staggering financial cost, the report reaches its final verdict. The report frames its conclusion with a simple question. Was this a crisis of chance or a crisis of choice? Was it just bad luck, some unforeseeable disaster? Or was it the direct result of specific decisions, of ignored warnings, and of a failure to adapt to a new reality? And this is the report's final answer, stated right in its opening pages. It's the central finding of this entire autopsy. Warwick's fiscal crisis was not an act of God. It was a crisis of choice. So the Cushman report explains the past, arguing that the problem wasn't a lack of money, but a failure to make tough choices. Its findings, though, they leave us with a massive question for the future. The state is in control now. The evidence has been presented. What choices will Warwick make next?